In this video, I'll be running through the 6 bottlenecks that are limiting growth in every D2C e-commerce business if they have been bootstrapped. And it all derives from the cash conversion cycle. Now, your cash conversion cycle is the length of time that it takes to turn inventory into cash, but more specifically, it measures how long a business will be deprived of cash if it increases its investment in inventory in order to expand customer sales. So it's therefore a measure of liquidity risk entailed by growth. If you want to grow your D2C e-commerce brand, but you don't want to go illiquid, so you don't want to go out of business, you need to be shortening your cash conversion cycle, as that's the limiter on how quickly you can grow. You need capital available to reinvest into marketing spend and increase variable costs and inventory purchasing to continue to fuel month-on-month increases in top-line revenue. And so increasing revenue is completely dependent on how short your cash conversion cycle is. Now, like any equation, you can derive cash conversion cycle into multiple different derivatives just by pulling down parts of the baseline formula. What we've done is we've pulled it into 6 different components that we can then use as levers to shorten the cash conversion cycle and improve the growth rate of your brand. These 6 levers are: number 1, CAC, the cost to acquire a customer. Number 2 is your average order value. Number 3 is your maintained markup. Number 4 is your customer return rate. Number 5 is your 30-day sell-through rate. And then number 6 is your operating expenses. Let's start with CAC. So by decreasing your cost to acquire a customer, you increase your net revenue, which increases your month-on-month COGS, which then decreases your cash conversion cycle due to faster inventory turnover. Now, what we're going to be doing on the next few slides is spending some extra time running through an actual example of how decreasing CAC increases your net cash position on a day 0, 30, 60 basis, and then how it also changes every single line in your profit and loss statement. We'll then be going through how that applies across all 6 different levers, how they all impact your cash conversion cycle as well as your net cash position, so that you can get an understanding of which is currently the bottleneck within your business, so that you can then go and address and attack that particular vector. Now, we're going to be spending extra time on these next few slides. So this will be the majority of the video, just the next few slides. And once you get an understanding for the table that I'm going to be running through, the structure, how it all looks, we'll then go really quickly through the following 5 levers. Starting off with CAC, which is the cost to acquire a customer. In this model, we've assumed that your current CAC is $65. What's going on here is on month 1, day 0, you have a starting inventory of $50,000 in stock. You do an inventory purchase of $27,000 to fuel for the month of revenue. You have $30,000 going towards marketing. You have top line revenue of $92,400, which is broken down accordingly based on new customer and repeat customer sales. You then have cost of goods sold, shipping and fulfillment fees, transaction fees, which comes out to a gross profit of $56,000. You then have marketing and OpEx, which pulls that down to $1,800 in net income. And then your starting cash position, so your bank account had $50,000 in it at the start of the month. Net cash flow was negative $2,000. And so your bank account has actually decreased in your cash position down to $47,900. Now, how has that happened, even though you had a net income in this month? It was because of the inventory purchase. So the inventory purchase directly pulls cash out of your bank. And then you had a net income which offsets this. So what we can actually see is that in the following month of day 30, your inventory position improves, so increases, because the net cash flow here and the net income went into that purchase order. And so that cash that you unlocked just went straight into inventory. Now, moving through the next month, once again, we have an inventory buy that's slightly less due to the buildup of inventory here. We have marketing, revenue, COGS, flows through to net income. In the following month, we have a net cash flow position of $900 and the ending cash position improves slightly. The reason for the inventory order adjustments is based on sell-through rate. So inventory purchases are generally purchased based on sell-through rate or lead times. And so there's an assumption built into the model that you'll be purchasing on an X amount of lead time or sell-through rate number, which we'll be tweaking down the line. Now let's assume that you dropped CAC by $15. You brought it down from 65 to 50. Well, what then happens is we actually start net cash flowing every single month, and our cash flow position improves slightly. But you don't really see the impact of these levers in a 30-day period. You really need to look out at 60, 90, 180 days to see the exponential impact that these small changes make in your levers to the actual position of the business. So if we zoom out to 60 days, you can see that now in month 3, your net cash flowing nearly $20,000. And the reason for that is because revenue has now jumped to $128,000. So comparing day 60 of CAC $65 and $50, we can see that if your CAC was $65 and we moved 60 days into the future, you would be making $3,500 in net income per month. Comparatively, with a CAC at 50, you would be making $21,700. So there is about a 7x in profitability by dropping your cost to acquire a customer. Alongside, your ending cash position moves from 50 to 69,000. So this is your actual bank account number will move up $19,000 from having a CAC $15 lower. Now moving into average order value, and this is where we'll start to speed things up as we move through. If you increase your average order value, it increases your new and your returning customer revenue, but it doesn't increase your OpEx or marketing. And so what ends up happening is you have faster inventory turnover and a improved net income position, which decreases your cash conversion cycle. And so with the exact same assumptions, all the same models here, we have an AOV of 150. We then compare that to an AOV of 180, and you can see what happens. Net income improves from 2.6 to 16.3. Net cash flow improves from $900 to $3,400, and our cash position improves accordingly. So we begin making $16,000 a month and compared to 2.6 due to the improvement in gross profit. And that gross profit has improved because net revenue improved with the exact same amount of customers being acquired per month with no additional increase in fixed expenses. If we zoom out to 60 days, you can see the impact that that's continuing to have. So we can see in month 3, we're generating $17,500 in net income. Comparatively, in situation 1 with an AOV of 150, we'd be generating 3.5. Net cash position is up to 66 versus 50. So our net cash flow position has improved by over 10x by simply having about a 30% increase in our average order value. Moving into maintained markup. Increasing your maintained markup decreases your COGS, and it decreases your new inventory orders as you don't need to have as much stock on hand to facilitate the same revenue level. So you end up decreasing your cash conversion cycle due to reduced inventory on hand required and an improved net income position through decreased COGS. And so we see this play out across a 60-day period. An MMU increase from 4 to 4.5. Now, this is simply the difference between slight negotiations with suppliers and a slight increase in pricing on site would result in this kind of change. And then what that ends up doing to net cash flow is it 4x's net cash flow in month 3. You go from cash flowing about 1.5 up to 5. Your net income improves from 3.5 to 6. How does this actually happen? Well, your COGS decreases. You're not spending as much on inventory to service this net revenue number. But in addition to that, it decreases the amount of inventory that you have to have on hand. And that's really where the unlock occurs here. Yes, the net income and the net cash flow, it might not be a huge increase. And in comparison to the last few examples that we've looked at where we've seen a 3, 4, 5, 10x improvement, yes, it's definitely not as much, but let's ground this in reality. It still is a 2x improvement in profitability of the business. But where the real unlock comes from is being able to take an inventory position down. And so now our inventory position moves from what would have been 55,000 down to under 50,000. And so our ending cash position changed from 50 to 62. So we get an enormous change in our cash position, which unlocks a greater ability for us to reinvest into marketing and growth and really see exponential growth in this circumstance that we wouldn't have seen here, as you wouldn't have been able to reinvest into growing customer acquisition as rapidly. That then moves into customer return rates. If you improve your customer return rate, you increase your repeat customer revenue, which increases total rev, which then decreases your CCC due to improved net income. In this instance, we have a brand whose daily revenue, 25% of it comes from returning customers. And then let's say they invest in retention, they start sending more emails, they have a more curated buying experience from first purchase. They manage to increase customer return rates to 35%. What impact that has is revenue goes from 98 to 113. Gross profit goes from 60 to 69. There was no increase in fixed expenses. Now, realistically, there might be, as there might have been an investment here into a retention agency or a staff member that could specifically focus on this core KPI. However, assuming no increase, that increases net income by about 10,000, which increases net cash flow by 5x. And this is something that we talk about a lot in other videos, which is that returning customer rate is a huge driver of profitability, as there's almost no associated cost with acquiring those customers back to site. When you acquire a new customer, you have a cost associated to acquire that customer. But when the customer returns and buys again, there typically isn't really any cost associated. Not many brands put a big expense budget into reacquiring existing customers. And so they end up being the driver of 80 to 90% of profit. And you can see that directly being the effect here. Simply through a 10% increase, we see a 5x in profitability. We then have 30-day sell-through rate. So increasing your 30-day sell-through rate decreases your new inventory orders, which reduces inventory on hand and improves your cash position. So if you were to improve your 30-day sell-through rate from 30 to 40%, and that could be a function of decreasing SKUs on hand that don't have strong sell-through rates, so simply refining your product range, and in addition, having a better inventory and purchasing management system, what ends up happening to your cash position is it goes from 50,000 to 70. You end up unlocking $20,000 in inventory and being able to push that into cash, which then will allow you to better reinvest into marketing and future inventory buys, which can unlock growth. And so this isn't a lever that changes net income at all. It doesn't change gross profit. It doesn't change net revenue, but instead it has an enormous impact on your net cash flow position by unlocking cash from inventory. The final bottleneck is operating expenses. If you decrease your OpEx, you increase your net income directly. And this is what a lot of D2C operators don't realize, is that fixed expenses have a one-to-one correlation with profit. Variable expenses do not, particularly marketing expenses as well. And so if you decrease your OpEx, you have a one-to-one increase in net income, which decreases your cash conversion cycle due to an improved cash position. An example here is if you have a brand on the left with $25,000 in OpEx versus a brand on the right who has now improved their OpEx position and decreased to $19,000, the difference that happens at the net income level is a $6,000 improvement. So there's no changes to revenue, there's no changes to gross profit, but then at the fixed expense level, you have this $6,000 decrease, which then flows into $7,000 in net cash flow. And so you're now a 4x more profitable brand because that 6,000 has a one-to-one impact to net cash position. And so now your net cash position has improved by 12,000 over this time period due to the reduction in OpEx. Now, what's important here is that you focus on 2 to 3 levers at once, and it then leads to exponential growth. And let me run you through an example. Let's say we have a brand who has 25,000 in OpEx, MMU of 4, and a 30-day sell-through rate of 30%. And they're all the assumptions that we just went through. And then we make the following improvements. Looking at OpEx, there may have been overinflated staff hiring during COVID due to inflated top-line revenue. Now that revenue's fallen back after the COVID peaks, it makes sense to have a reduction in staffing, which takes OpEx down from 25 to 19. When it comes to maintained markup, we go to negotiations with suppliers. We make slight improvements on our COGS, as well as making slight pricing adjustments on site, which improves MMU from 4 to 4.5. And then lastly, we identified that 30-day sell-through rate can be improved through better inventory management and through a reduction in SKUs that simply aren't selling well and might also not have great MMU associated. And so we're also seeing an improvement in MMU by cutting out those SKUs. Now, as a function of these 3 operational changes, the business changes from yielding a net income of 3.5 to 12.2 per month. Their net cash flowing 11.2 rather than 1.7. And more importantly, out of all of these numbers for facilitating growth, the net cash position moves from 50K to 91K. So there's almost a doubling in the net cash position, which is going to enable much faster growth rates for reinvestments into high ROI activities like marketing, etc. And these are just 3 operational levers. We didn't even look at CAC. We didn't look at returning customer rates. We didn't look at average order value. All we looked at was OpEx, MMU, and 30-day sell-through rate. And we could have a 2x impact on the cash position of this brand. So now that you understand the 6 bottlenecks and how they impact the cash conversion cycle, in the next video, we'll be looking at actionable advice for resolving each of these bottlenecks.